Well, let's get more on this now. Joining us from Chicago is Abunimah, co-founder of the news website Electronic Intifada, also the author of One Country and The Battle for Justice in Palestine. Mr. Abunimah, always good to have you with us on Al Jazeera. What do you make of the Israeli account that this was a standard operation that went wrong? Why would Israel risk such an operation at a time that the UN and Egypt were making progress in de-escalating tensions?
Well, that's exactly the question. And if this were an isolated incident, it might be easier to accept the Israeli explanation that this was not intended to be an assassination raid or a kidnapping raid. But Israel has, unfortunately, a pattern of sabotaging ceasefire agreements. It's almost 10 years to the day that Israel launched a similar attack in Gaza, killing 6 members of Hamas. This was on November 5th, 2008. That ended a 4-month ceasefire and led directly to the Operation Cast Lead, in which Israel massacred 1,400 Palestinians. And you'd think that after Israel violated numerous ceasefires with similar results, that they would have learned the lesson. But it seems that the Israeli leaders are pyromaniacs. They cannot tolerate calm. They cannot tolerate that people in Gaza live in anything like peace. And so they carried out this reckless and destructive raid and are now subjecting people in Gaza to terror and killing and bombing. But they've also subjected their own Israeli population to the retaliatory and operations of the Palestinian resistance factions.
And Hamas has released this video, they've said, of them attacking this bus once it was emptied of Israeli soldiers. They know what kind of retaliation an actual attack on Israeli soldiers would lead to. So what is Hamas doing here?
Well, I think what Hamas has done, it should be contrasted with what Israel does, because for months Israel has been murdering women, children, medics, journalists with snipers, unarmed people across the boundary. It's not an international border. Al Jazeera should stop calling it a border. Across the boundary into Gaza, using snipers to murder unarmed civilians. And here, what we saw today on the video was that Hamas had within its sights a bus full of Israeli soldiers. It could have fired at that bus when it was full, which would have been an entirely legitimate attack against a military target. But instead, it allowed all the soldiers to disembark from the bus, all except one who was injured, in order to send a message to Israel that, look, we have the capability to inflict tremendous damage to you, but we do not want an escalation. And that has been the consistent message from the resistance factions in Gaza. But we see that Israel is incapable and unwilling to live in peace and calm with Palestinians. Israel just is allergic to calm and ceasefire.
Well, how do you think that they are going to respond to this message? Because the Israeli Security Cabinet is meeting on Tuesday to decide what their next steps will be. We know that Prime Minister Netanyahu is under pressure from those who are even more hawkish than he is. Is he going to give into that pressure, you know, to that mow the lawn strategy that Israeli ministers have encouraged towards Gaza, where they propose basically flattening it every few years?
Yes, well, of course, Israel is riven by tribalism and factionalism and religious extremism. So you have a defense minister, Avigdor Lieberman, who is one of the most extreme and violent politicians in the world today, who has been saying for months that he wants to carry out a large-scale attack on Gaza. And we've seen other members of the government calling for more restraint, not out of any sympathy with Palestinians, but because they know that carrying out another massacre will only increase the isolation of Israel and indeed will increase the determination of Palestinians to defend themselves and resist. So Israel doesn't really have a strategy here. What we've seen the UN and others trying to broker is some kind of long-term truce. Remember, we're talking about this now because rockets were flying into Israel. But the violence from Israel against Palestinians is constant. Since the beginning of the year, Israel has killed more than 200 Palestinians in Gaza, the vast majority of them unarmed civilians. And the violence of the siege continues to take Palestinian lives and livelihoods. So there was an effort to come up with a truce that would relieve the siege and allow Palestinians to live. And what we've seen is somebody in Israel, I don't know whether it's Netanyahu or the defense minister Lieberman or some other extremist or saboteur, who decided to send this commando squad into Gaza to blow everything up. But let us hope that history doesn't repeat itself and that this cycle of insanity and bloodshed and death started by Israel can be brought to a quick halt.
Mr. Abunimah, thank you very much for your time, for your views on this. That is Ali Abunimah live in Chicago. Thank you.
Thank you.